Welcome to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic. Marge was searching for the purpose of her life and the truth that would tie everything together to make sense of what was taught and what was happening on our planet, the fire that was creating all the smoke. Through many experiences, she was finally led to the knowledge book that provided all the answers. Marge is now talking about this gift to humanity on Knowledge Book Radio, so all can be united in peace, love, and harmony. This live call-in show at 1-800-930-2819 is amazing. So get ready to hear about the Knowledge Book. Here's your host, Marge Potasic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marge Potasic, and you're listening to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic on Transformation Talk Radio. For the next hour, as we have done for a while, we will continue our series of Omega Talks, usually given at the end of every month as part of the unification program of the Call to Friendship Association that's mentioned in the Knowledge Book. And what's happening in these talks, what we do is we connect science and spirituality by discussing world knowledge and connecting it to the Omega dimension. And those of you who have been reading the Knowledge Book and maybe listening to the radio, you will know by now that the Omega dimension is the 19th dimension, which has been opened to our planet, to humanity, through the Knowledge Book for the first time. And this week, we're going to talk about music, go through the brief history of music as to how we have arrived at the multitude of music types that we currently have on our planet. So, when I was looking at the internet, I was curious one day to see how many types of music there are, and the types of genres of music there are. And with the result I got actually confused me, because at this point, according to the internet, the range of genres goes from about 9 to thousands of genres, depending how you differentiate the music and how things go from there. So my question, of course, is, how did we get here? We didn't start with multiple types of music. How do we wind up with this kind of music? And what is the path that resulted in the music that is available today? So when you just think about it, you have rock, jazz, jazz blues, international music, urban music, soundtrack music, seasonal or holiday music, new age music, folk music, electronic music, easy listening, metal, pop, classical, Latin, rap, country, alternative, and reggae. And these are just major categories. They all have subcategories that have then subcategories below them. So we will be addressing these questions using the following outline. So we'll talk about the brief history of music, some of the fascinating periods that happened in music, the 60s music revolution, live music and community, the music we have today, and we will tie it up with a conclusion. So briefly, a history of music. Few would question that music has played an important role in the life cycle of humans, perhaps even before we could speak. Significant evidence has been discovered that very early man developed primitive flutes from animal bones and used stones and wood as percussion. And we know this because we have found, or at least archaeologists have found, bones that look like flutes because they have holes in them. When you blow through them, a sound is produced. Now, of course, voice would have been the first and most natural means of expression of our distant ancestors, and this was used to bond socially or to comfort a sleepless child. However, it is from these humble beginnings that the music we enjoy today first started to evolve. As we move further through time, we find increasing evidence of music's key role in both sacred and secular settings. And although the division into sacred and secular didn't come about until many, many, many years later. Influence from the West to the East merged into the pre-Christian music of the Greeks and later the Romans. Musical practices and conventions, perhaps conveyed by traveling musicians, brought a wealth of diversity and invention. Surviving Greek notation, apparently the Greeks were the first ones to use the notation to depict a particular note or a way of sounding that note. So we get the Greek notation from this period gives scientists and musicologists alike a vital clue to the way that the music of the time might have sounded. It certainly indicates remarkable links to the music that would follow, perhaps most notably through the use of modality in Greek music. In the frescoes and in some written accounts, including the Bible, we learned about the instruments that were featured in Roman and Greek times and their significance to the respective cultures. For example, the trumpet used as an instrument of announcement and ceremony, or the lyre as an integral player in the songs of poets and minstrels. So we have the lyre, we have the trumpet, we have the pompous march later on, however, or the triumphal marches later on. Across Europe, from the early part of the 1st century, monasteries and abbeys became the places where music became embedded in the lives of those devoted to God and their followers. Christianity had established itself, and with it came a new liturgy that demanded a new music. Although early Christian music had its roots in the practices and beliefs of the Hebrew people, what emerged from this was to become the basis for sacred music for centuries to come. The chants that were composed devoutly followed the sacred Latin text in a fashion that was tightly controlled and given only to the glory of God. Music was very much subservient to the words, without flourish or frivolity. It was the words that were the most important, whatever notes that those words were sounded in did not really matter that much until Pope Gregory, between 540 and 604 Common Era, created the Gregorian chant. And he basically is credited with moving the progress of sacred music forward and developing what is now called the Gregorian chant, characterized by the haunting sound of the open perfect fifth. Now, of course, when I heard about the perfect fifth, I wanted to know what it was. So when I got the definition on the internet, it said, the perfect fifth is a chord comprised of the tonic and the fifth with no third present. So basically what this means, maybe in layman terms, or as I understand it, is you have a note of music, let's say do, and then you skip the notes in between, and we'll have do is the first, do, re, mi, fa, sol. So sol is the fifth, so it'll be playing, the music will be played with do and so together, and that's your perfect fifth. If you want to start with re, then re, fa, sol, la, ti, then re, mi, sol. So actually the re would find out will be played with la, and then if you go up the scale, you'll have mi being combined with ti, and that'll give you the perfect fifth. So it took me a while to figure this out, but basically it just means you start with a note, you go up 5, don't note the other 2, don't play the 3 in between, you just play the first and the fifth, starting with the first note that you're playing. So in terms of periods of music, of course you have the prior eras prior to 1150. And 1150 is considered to be the medieval age. So from 1150 to 1400 is the medieval age. From 1400 to 1600 is the Renaissance. From 1600 to 1750 is Baroque. From 1750 to 1830 is classical. Then 1830 to 1860 is early romantic. 1860 to 1920 is romantic. And then, of course, you've got the current post-Great War years, starting with 1917, which is the World War I, and then onwards with all kinds of things developed. So let's go step by step. In the medieval times, this is from 1150 to 1400, this is where we again we can begin to be fairly certain as to how most of the music that has survived actually sounded. There are no recording instruments at that time. We have no way of knowing because sound does not stay forever in place. I mean, maybe the reverberations of atoms are in place, and maybe if we had instruments that were fine enough to be able to discern them, we could put them all together, but we have no such thing right now, so we don't know what things sound like. We can only surmise what it sounded like based on what the historical record that was set and was left behind. So the earliest written secular music dates from the 12th century troubadours. But most notated manuscripts emanate from places of learning, usually connected with the church, and therefore inevitably have a religious basis. Now, when we go into the Renaissance, which is 1400 to 1600, this 15th century witnessed vastly increased freedoms. Composers were still almost entirely devoted to choral writing, and the few instrumental compositions which have survived often create the impression of being vocal works in disguise, but minus the words. So the actual words are the most important, with the notes basically being subservient to that. And whatever music survived from that time was basically almost like the voices singing, but the instruments were singing instead of the voices. Now in the Renaissance, 1400 to 1600, the second half of the 16th century witnessed the beginnings of the tradition which many musical lovers readily associate with normal feel of classical music, what we call classical music right today. Gradually, composers moved away from the modal system of harmony which had predominated for over 300 years towards the organization of their work into major and minor scales, thereby imparting the strong sensation of each piece having a definite tonal character or tonal center or key. This was also something of a golden period for choral composition, as a seemingly endless flow of a cappella masses, motets, anthems, psalms, and madrigals flowed from the pens of the masters of the age. In addition, instrumental music came into its own for the first time, especially keyboard music in the form of fantasias, variations, and dance movements. So we're getting closer to the present. Now, in the Baroque period, 1600 to 1750, here the foundations were laid for the following 300 or so years of musical expression. The idea of the modern orchestra was born, along with opera, concerto, sonata, and modern cantata. A rather soft-grained viol string family of the Renaissance was gradually replaced by the bolder violin, viola, and cello. The harpsichord was invented, and important advances were made in all instrumental groups. Now, if anyone remembers the music from the Baroque period, it's very fancy. There are trills, there are all kinds of variations in notes itself. It's very complicated, and even the trills have trills. Until about the 1700s, the old modes still exerted themselves from time to time, but from the beginning of the 18th century, the modern harmonic system based upon major and minor scales was used throughout Europe. Classical music gradually began to work its way into the very fabric of society, being played outdoors at dinner parties or special functions, for example, Handel's water music. On a purely domestic level, every wealthy lady would have spinet to play, and at meal times the large and rich houses would employ musicians to play the most popular and famous composers. So if we remember, let's say, in movies or TV dramas like Pride and Prejudice, every woman was supposed to be able to sing and play the harpsichord or the piano, the only form of the piano. They, of course, needed to, and it was great entertainment to be able to do at the end of dinner or after dinner, sit around and enjoy each other's company and enjoy the music that was being produced and played by people at home. Then we come to the classical period, which is 1750 to 1830. And here was the introduction of the sonata form, which has dominated instrumental composition to the present day. With it came the development of the modern concerto, the symphony, sonata, trio, and quartet to a new peak of structural and expressive refinement. The classical period is characterized by its near obsession with structural clarity, and it has almost a mathematical basis, or has a mathematical basis, certain structures being followed in the development of the theme of the music and the development of the music and how the music progresses. Now, the classical period starts from 1750 to 1830, and the seeds of the classical age were sown by a number of composers such as Schubert and Hanauer, as well as the more historically respected names like Gluck, Boccherini, and at least three of Jonathan Sebastian Bach's sons, Carl Philipp Emanuel, Wilhelm Friedman, and Johann Christian. They were representative of a period that is an entirely novel style based on symmetry and sensibility that came to dominate the music of the latter half of the 18th century through two composers of extraordinary significance, Joseph Haydn and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And I do remember the film Amadeus. It was an amazing portrayal of Mozart's life and how he composed, and he was able to compose an entire piece of music, whether an opera or an orchestra piece, whatever it was, from start to finish without having to correct one note. Then comes the period of the early Romantic, 1830 to 1860. As the classical period reached its zenith, it was becoming increasingly clear that the amount and intensity of expression composers were seeking to achieve was beginning to go beyond that which a classically trained orchestra could possibly encompass. The next period of musical history found composers attempting to balance the expressive and the formal in music with a variety of approaches which would have left composers of any previous age utterly bewildered. The early Romantic era was the golden age of the virtuoso, where the most fiendishly difficult music was performed with nonchalant ease. The emotional range of music during this period was considerably widened, as was its harmonic vocabulary and the range and the number of instruments which might be called upon to play it. The next 100 years found composers either embracing wholeheartedly the ideals of Romanticism or in some way reacting against them. The seven leading composers of the age were undoubtedly Berlioz, Chopin, Mendelssohn, Schumann, Liszt, Verdi, and Beethoven. Now, apparently there was a piece of music that was composed at this point. I don't remember who it was, but there are two pianists, two composers who composed for the piano, and they had a contest of who could actually play the piece of music. The left hand was the notes that were supposed to be played on the left hand were low on the scale, or low on the to the left of the piano, and the right hand, or the right part of the piano, the right hand was engaged in. So you have both hands on extreme ends of the piano, and there was a note to be played in between. One of the composers says, "How am I supposed to play with this?" And the one who composed it basically bent over and he played that note with his nose. So this is the kind of competition, this is the kind of virtuosity that came into play. And if anyone tries to play Chopin's music or any of the music, it is very difficult to play. However, there are people, and currently are people, who are playing that and making it look easy. Now, Liszt, who lived between 1811 and 1886, said, "Music must, as of yore, recognize God and the people as its living fountainhead. It must flow from the former to the latter and vice versa, so as to ennoble, comfort, and purify man, and bless and praise God." So this was the purpose of the music as he saw it. Then comes the late Romantic, 1860 to 1920. With the honorable exceptions of Brahms and Bruckner, composers of this period shared a general tendency towards allowing their natural inspirations free rein, often pacing their compositions more in terms of their emotional content and dramatic continuity rather than organic structural growth. The eventual end of Romanticism came with the fragmentation of this basic style, composers joining schools of composition, each with a style that was in vogue for a short period of time. So here we come to a complete change. This is starting with about 1900. All of a sudden, things that were united, things were basically going slowly in terms of evolution of music, things that how the music was composed, who was listening, how they were listening, and how everything worked together, was going along slowly, 300 years at a time, 150 years over time. However, starting in 1900, all of a sudden, all kinds of fragmentations came into play, and different schools came to play. So the 20th century music between 1900 and 2000, and this is what they call, since the Great War, meaning the War of 1917, is the most bewildering of all, as composers pulled in various contradictory and opposing directions. So diverse are the styles adopted throughout the greater part of the 20th century that only by experimentation can listeners discover for themselves whether certain composers are to their taste or not. So, if you could imagine from the beginning of the 1900s, you have the Charleston, you have Prohibition, you have banjo bands, you have blues coming into play, you have jazz coming into play, all kinds of innovations. You have Bing Crosby, you have Bob Hope, you have all kinds of music, you have Elvis Presley, you have the British invasion, you have all kinds of music that is coming into play in the 20th century, and each one basically is something different that came before, something different that was actually in place at that time. So the 20th century brought about many innovations on how music was performed and appreciated. And this century used technology to enhance compositions. So who are the musicians? You've got the Beatles. You've got the sitar being played. You've got the Rolling Stones. You've got jazz. You've got a whole kinds of stuff. And once the radio was invented, music as we know it changed forever. Other technologies such as recording and reproduction devices, not to mention the television and music videos, also influenced the era, bringing music to the masses. With these revolutionary advancements permeating the culture, music flavor, tempo, and form also dramatically transformed and evolved. This is evident by the fact that every decade in the 20th century ushered in new sound and a new hunger for something different. Now, what does the Knowledge Book have to say about this? As I was reviewing this topic, what hit me is that up to about the 1920, up to about the First World War, evolution in music was slow. There were periods of music that lasted 300 years, 200 years, 150 years, 300 years again. It was a long period of time, and one basically evolved upon the shoulders of the other, and one basically led to the other. There was no humongous change in between. There were refinements, there were structures that were given in between based on what came from the old. However, once we hit 1900, everything exploded. You had all kinds of music being produced, all kinds of different types of music and different instruments and different methodologies to get that music to everybody. So what happened in 1900? In 1900 was the beginning of when the Accelerated Evolution Program was started on this planet. And this is a program where cosmic energies were given to the planet to evolve humanity much more quickly. And this is the time where these cosmic energies, these frequencies that were coming in, were given that were never given before. So basically, all these musicians were basically inspired by some frequency that was out there that was coming into this planet, and they were interpreting that frequency into their own particular music style. So in the 1920s, when you had the Charleston, you had the Flappers, this is when those musicians were able to tap into those frequencies that were given at that time and were able to produce that kind of music. Same thing goes with jazz, same thing goes for the blues, same thing goes for rock and roll, same thing goes for everything. All of a sudden, a lot more cosmic energy was given to us. A lot more frequencies were given to us, that anyone who was able to reach a specific frequency in those that were given was then able to be inspired and produce something different from that point forward. So you have fragmentation because different individuals were at their own individual evolution level, which means they were at their own particular frequency, and therefore they were able to pick up and connect with the magnetic field where those frequencies reside, and therefore be able to then transform those energies through their mind, through their brain telex system, into the music that they produced. Now, especially in the 1960s, there was a revolution. And to quote John Lennon, you say you want a revolution? Well, the answer is look no further than the 60s, the decade of political protest, sexual liberation, psychedelic drugs, eyebrow-raising fashion, and sweet, sweet music was the one in play. Now, this, of course, based on the information coming from The Guardian, who says that it was the era of sex, drugs, and pop revolution, but also of anti-war protests and inner-city riots. And the more the young pushed forward, the more the adults pushed back. So you've got Janis Joplin, you've got Peter, Paul, and Mary, you've got all kinds of musicians coming into play. And of course, when Elvis Presley first came in, that shocked the generation. That was the 50s. And rock and roll was not something that was generally accepted, and especially the people who were good people burned the records, burned the music, and did not want the music to be played. However, rock and roll did not stay in place. It spread from the U.S., and that marked the arrival of youth rebellion in the teenager. Music from now on would always come with a hint of rebellion. So you've got singers like Bob Dylan and Joe Baez, who led the movement, and Dylan's Blowing in the Wind in 1962 actually became a civil rights anthem. The protest songs and psychedelia of the 1960s were soundtracks to a sexual revolution and anti-war marches. Music had become a vehicle for social change. I mean, music had always been the expression of the local cultures at the time, but right now was specifically geared towards changing society into something other than what it was at that particular time. So in the Knowledge Book on page 357, it says, colors symbolize the consciousness levels of humans and societies. Pure consciousnesses like multicolors. They live in a color jamboree. These colors make them happy, like hippies in Europe, natives in Africa, and the islands. Each color you sympathize with symbolizes the power of your spiritual potential. Now, when people discuss music, they always discuss music with a particular color. Well, not always discuss music with a particular color, but every music piece you could associate with various colors. And especially when you look at the album covers in the 1960s, the album covers were full of color. They're full of unusual design, and they, in fact, actually represented the music that was inside those albums. Now, of course, music has existed since the dawn of time, and it will continue to enrich the lives of humanity forever. But what's going to be happening now? We're now in the 21st century. What's happening to music and what's going to happen further on down the line? There's more music to hear than ever before, and it's happening all over the world. Global travel has become much more convenient, and so with enough time and money, a fanatical fan can trek the globe to hear extremely exciting music every day of the year. We can also experience a great deal of music happening in all these places without leaving our homes. And as many of us have realized in this time of us being basically in our homes without being able to leave, that we've been unified with the music that's being played throughout the different countries. And there were concerts that are being played, concerts that are being portrayed, so that that are unifying us, and we all join in to listen to them. And this is unifying humanity at a different level. So what happens? When we do this, we listen on smartphones and all over the world music that's there for us to enjoy. and actually also be a source of inspiration for our own creative impulses. So we went from different kinds of music and where it was stored. With all the technology and ability to stream music, why do we go to concerts in droves? Now, as you know, concerts have become very, very popular, and thousands upon thousands of people go to these concerts. Why do they go, and what draws them? Well, based on one study, concert goers lead happier lives, and that's based on science. It's a sense of liveliness incomparable to most other moments we experience in the day-to-day grind. Ultimately, it's the combination of live music and community that makes these experiences so worthy of our happiness. According to a study done in Australia by researchers at Deakin University, Melissa Weinberg and Dawn Joseph, they reported that Australians who participate in communal music experiences, whether it's at a live concert or a communal dance gathering, have elevated levels of overall satisfaction in life. Ultimately, the common thread is to engage with music in the company of others. And as anyone has been to a concert or been in a location where music is played and dancing takes place, whether it's at a wedding or whether it's at a christening or whether it's at a concert or some kind of festive occasion where music is being played, or in my case specifically, at my mother's funeral, my family tends to be musically inclined. So I have cousins that basically play instruments, the guitar, the drums, guitar, other kinds of instruments as well. And basically got together and we sang. We sang our favorite songs. We sang Mother's favorite songs. So it is the sense of togetherness. This is the sense of being unified. So why do we actually like certain types of music? We generally tend to like this one, don't like the other one. One makes us feel very good, while other music does not, make us feel good at all. So if people listen to a certain type of music and add emotional experiences to songs or a genre in general, this increases the likelihood of enjoying the music and being emotionally affected by it. This helps explain why many people might have strong reactions to music their parents listened to frequently when they were children. Now, what surprises me is that the music of my generation, like the music, like the Beatles, like the Rolling Stones, like Joan Baez, like all those musicians of that period, it is currently being listened to as well. And that has always, I was wondering why this is happening. Now, there is a study done by David M. Greenberg, a PhD, who is a psychologist and musician at the University of Cambridge. And he actually put people in 3 categories. One category was the type E or empathizers, and these people tend to focus on people's thoughts and emotions. There are those who are the systematizers or type S, who focus on rules and systems. And of course, there's type B that are the balanced ones who focus equally on both areas, meaning they're both empathetic and systematizers. So after reviewing the results of thousands of interviews, it was found that type E thinkers tended to like low-energy songs with emotional depth, including sad songs and genres like soft rock and singer-songwriters. Type B personalities tended to display a broader range of preferences than either of the other types, not surprisingly. Type S thinkers, conversely, tended to prefer more intense and structured music like heavy metal or classical music in the avant-garde vein. So, birds of a feather flock together. To me, according to the Knowledge Book, basically, people with similar evolution levels, people with similar frequency levels, basically will like similar types of music and be able to participate in and feel comfortable in specific situations, specific music being played. And this is one of the ways where the selection process goes on. Because depending on which music you like, what kind of clothes you wear, what draws you, that tells exactly yourself and others and the powers that be where you are in terms of evolution, where you are in terms of energy and frequency, and therefore the next lessons are being arranged for you to be able to rise in evolution and be able to rise in energy and frequency. Now, there's another theory. There was a new study published recently in the journal Nature suggests that it's not biology that dictates our musical taste, but rather hundreds of years of learned behavior. This raises the possibility that it might be possible to develop the opposite preference given enough exposure to dissonant music. And this was said by Josh McDermott, the author of the study and assistant professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. However, he said, this has yet to be demonstrated. In other words, getting used to something different. But actually, over time, things that we don't like, we eventually do manage to like or accept. Now, what the Knowledge Book explains is that a person completely in tune with music has no thoughts and no negativity. So if you have no thoughts and no negativity, that means you've reached the dimension of God, which is love and which is acceptance, which is no thought and no negativity. Quote on page 16, a whirling dervish in ecstasy, reuniting with his love, his God, with the sounds of the reed flute is the same as the lover dancing to the notes of music, and they are on the same frequency. They have reached the plane of love, art, and true love, which is the most supreme plane. The paths are the same. Music is universal. It assists to achieve ecstasy for every society according to their understanding. So one day, we will be all at the same frequency, the frequency of love, where no negativity can exist, and we will be the same musical sphere. So what's happening next in terms of technology? First of all, we started with vinyl records. Then we went to cassette tapes. Then we went to audio CDs. Then we went to MP players. Now we've got smartphones that we can do everything in terms of music and videos and everything else. What's happening next? Well, music today is change, disruption, and transformation, and all of it is accelerating. That's the story of our tech transformed world of music and entertainment. TikTok was one of the industry's biggest stories last year. TikTok officially launched only a couple of years back after swallowing up Musical.ly in 2017. Most experts dismissed TikTok as the night 2019 began. So did most U.S. consumers in TikTok's target Gen Z demographic. However, 12 months later, when 2020 started, TikTok is a major new social media force, and not just for music anymore. And that's how things are happening. That's how quickly things are happening. And TikTok is actually Generation Z's latest obsession. Music today, basically strap on your space goggles and get ready for liftoff. Where is music today and where is it going? According to Forbes and media mogul Meg Whitman, you have nanoseconds to adapt now, she cautions, and to think that right now only about 50% of the world is connected to the internet. Imagine 5 years from now when many expect virtually the entire world of 8 billion to be connected thanks to 5G. That inevitably leads to significantly more content demand and overall content consumption. That bodes well for all creators, including the musician. So basically, all the possibilities exist where each individual will be able to produce and be able to play and be inspired by the music that's going on. The Knowledge Book on page 132 says, prepare your subsequent knowledge in accordance with the unknowns. Then you will receive messages of better quality. On this path, all the branches of art will assist you. Press, radio, television, as well as painting, sculpture, ceramics, theater, opera, ballet, cinema, always convey the messages to you. Music and concerts assist you in quite a different way. Their vibrations are effective on your cells. Your consciousness codes that become richer by these channels will grasp the messages given to you more easily. So basically, the music is playing and is affecting our bodies as well. It is affecting the cells on our bodies as well. It is raising those cells to higher energies, to higher frequencies, and therefore raising your body's evolution level as well. So your body becomes stronger, the body becomes healed at that particular point in time. So just like color symbolizes our consciousness, so does the music that we like. We resonate with the sound and colors that match our evolution consciousness. The Knowledge Book on page 269 says, colors and sound are always one inside the other. Each sound has a color, each color has a sound. Just like the universes and the galaxies rotating one inside the other to constitute the atomic whole. That which constitutes these universes and galaxies are the vibrations and the reflection of these realms of sound and color. A systematic tableau constitutes the natural circulation. So how does this all put together? How does this function? Basically, at the beginning of the evolution of music, it was used both in medicine and in conveying specific rituals. So when we look at, let's say, the American Indian culture, when you look at the Aborigines, when you look at the native peoples of each land, each native culture has its own particular set of instruments, has its own particular set of music, has its own particular set of procedures to be able to heal and to be able to teach. So, and this is how the music first started to evolve, and this is how music gradually grew. And as I was saying before, the music evolution took place very slowly because basically we were given a static amount of energy, no more than we could actually tolerate, and just enough so we could tolerate it. And however, the gradual increase was done very, very slowly so that there was no great abrupt change over time. I mean, eventually music did change, music did evolve to different styles and different kinds of expressions, and different types of musical instruments came into play as well. We went from the bone flute to a musical orchestra. We went to tech music. We went into modularization of the voice to produce different sounds as well. So this actually, the evolution of music correlates with our own evolution, our own spiritual growth over time. So this was a slow progression, slow gradual progression. However, once we hit the year 1900, and that's when the accelerated evolution plan for humanity was started, where more energies were being given, more cosmic influences were being given, and those people who were able to, whatever dimension they were at, allowed by their evolutionary level, they were able to connect with that frequency and were able to basically bring back to us and interpret for us those energies at that particular frequency as their particular kind of music. So all kinds of music was being portrayed because all kinds of people at all kinds of different evolutionary levels were connecting with those energies and producing the music that dimension actually gave them. So over time, we need to be able to unify all this, and all the messages that are given to us through whatever media is being given to us, whether it's ballet, whether it's music, whether it's hip-hop, whether it's heavy metal, whatever it is, those individuals who are at that frequency will be able to gather together, unify together, and their bodies will become stronger, and they will be able, through the music that they play, and that impinges on their cells, and eventually everyone will rise through the Accelerated Evolution program started in 1900 and continued into the 21st century, where more energies are being given, more frequencies are being given, and therefore we are evolving much more quickly, and we are able eventually to become a genuine human through the energies and the frequencies that are being given, and we will be able to all unified at the frequency of love and true love, which is the dimension of God, and where there no negativity exists. So eventually we'll get to that point, and that's what we're working to. And that's why all the programs of the Knowledge Book are actually designed to actually allow us to accomplish this. Okay, so now it looks like it's time for a break. and we will come back and we will summarize what we have covered today. We'll see you in a little bit. Please come back.
Conscious Confidence Radio, a timeless wisdom with Sarah Main. Tune in each month on Transformation Talk Radio and join Sarah on an adventurous journey to the deeper level of meaning to move beyond today's world of constant change, confusion, and uncertainty beyond the shadow of fear. This hit show explores key concepts such as confidence, values, and attitude in a dynamic way. To learn more about Sarah and her work, visit sarahmain.com.
Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed by your mind? Powerless when it seems to spin in worry circles or bombard you with self-critical thoughts? Do you want to learn how to master your mind and feel more in control of your life? Listen to Dr. Friedman's Empowerment Radio. Shift from confusion to clarity, self-doubt to confidence, and from anxiety to peace and balance. Dr. Friedman and his many guest experts share the insights and tools you want to live with greater ease, joy, and purpose. Tune in to Empowerment Radio every first and third Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time.
Hey, how's it going? If it's stressful or just plain exhausting, New Light Living is here to ask, is this the way you want to live? Join me, your intuitive spiritual life coach and host, Ulrika Sullivan, every week on New Light Living. Discover the power of creative tools to start living every day as your ideal dream day. See your life in the new light. To learn more, visit newlightliving.com.
Break your snooze button habits for good with the Soul Stretching Sisters on the I Am Power Hour with me, Terry J. Walker.
And me, Dr. Pat, on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Pump up your spiritual muscle as we share stories,
aspire higher,
and live a whole lot larger.
To help you unleash your powered up,
pumped up, I Am Soul Stretching Success.
Anything can happen when we take to the airwaves.
And all things become possible during the I Am Power Hour.
Yeah, yippee skippy to that, baby. We're not done yet. Some of us are out here to educate and inspire. This year, 2020, is the year we gotta show me the money in the cash flow. I'm Dr. Pat. This is the Dr. Pat Show. This is Talk Radio to Thrive By.
Visit thedrpatshow.com.
And we're back with the Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Patazik on Transformation Talk Radio. And I just remembered that I forgot to mention the websites. And basically, the Call to Friendship Association website is www.calltofriendship.org. The United States Knowledge Book website is www.usa.theknowledgebook.net. The Turkish World Brotherhood Union website is www.dkb-davidkiteboy-mevlana.org.tr. And my telephone number is 973-787-7035. If you have any questions or any ideas that came up to you when you were listening to this broadcast. And of course, my email address is mmjp99, Mary John Peter 99 @gmail.com. So please look at these websites, especially the Turkish website, because it has lots of information. If you're doing the reading program, it definitely will tell you which fascicule, which chapter you are to be reading at that particular point in time. So again, the Call to Friendship website is www.calltofriendship.org. Okay, my telephone number. Okay, so what have we covered in this past broadcast? Number one, we went over the kinds of music and we went over the historical development of the music, starting with even people before they learned how to speak. It looks like they were playing musical instruments. They created musical instruments like the flute. Of course, the voice would have been, speaking, and eventually language developed. We did another talk on that a while back. And then music developed into what we have now as the indigenous peoples, the native peoples' music right now. And it still exists right now. And it's centuries old and thousands of years old in some places. And this is music that is being used to transmit stories, to transmit the culture of the native people. And it is also used as a method to heal and to teach. So eventually, music was separated into secular, meaning everyday music for people outside of the church or some religious experience. And there are also sacred music, religious music. And this is the music that eventually, on the Western side, developed into the music that we have today. In between was the Gregorian chant, which was a specific type of tonality. And it sounds beautiful, especially in the churches, because of the echo chamber that the churches actually create. And this is where the perfect fifth was used to chant the words in Latin. Okay, then of course we went through the medieval period with its own particular music and instruments, mostly on choral music, mostly on, we have some of that remains. And this is the beginning where the music was actually being notated, where we can actually kind of guess what music was played and how it was played, because we actually have some documentation of how that was to be performed. Then comes the Renaissance, then comes the Baroque, the creation of the orchestra. So whatever was being done, let's say, in the courts of Europe, where the monarch would commission a composer to produce a funeral march, to compose the wedding march, to compose a victory march. All this was actually produced, and eventually we went to the classical, the early romantic, and the romantic music. And as of the 1900s, 1920, the end of the First World War, which is 1917, we came into an explosion of different musical types and different musical instruments that were being played, and new musical instruments were being created, and new methodologies were created to actually preserve and to be able to replay the music of before. So even though the musicians themselves have died, the performers themselves have died, we can actually listen to their songs. I could listen to Elvis Presley, I could listen to Bing Crosby, I could listen to any of the jazz players, because the music has been recorded and we are able to play it and have it played back from whatever stored medium that we have. Now, the other side of things is that music is universal. It is played everywhere, and right now it is also serving to unify humanity during its time of being closed up at home, where we can listen, all of us individually in our own home. However, we can listen to the music that is being played in different places at the same time, which is then put together and then is given to us to be able to enjoy in our own peace and home. Why do people go to concerts? And this is another one of the big things that had evolved from, let's say, going to the opera, going to the theater, going to an orchestra, sorry. So concerts, basically all those people who are in tune with that particular type of music basically go, and right now thousands of people are going to there. So basically this is a unification on a grander scale. All those individuals who like that particular type of music basically are coming in, are being unified, and eventually that music works on their bodies, works on their souls. At that point, they have no negativity and no thoughts in their brain, because they're completely in tune with the music, which means all those thousands of individuals are actually at one frequency, at one consciousness at that point. And this is what our aim is, to be able to be at the same consciousness level. And this is basically a training, baby steps getting to that point. So music actually is a means, and music is a way for us to be able to attain a certain consciousness level. And eventually we will attain through the work that we, through the music that we listen to, through the energies and frequencies that we are able to bring into ourselves through the programs of the Knowledge Book, through reading the Knowledge Book, that will allow us to be at the frequency of true love and love where no negativity exists, and we have actually arrived at the dimension of God, which is, of course, our purpose. So this is it for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please do call or email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic. Marge was searching for the purpose of her life and the truth that would tie everything together to make sense of what was taught and what was happening on our planet, the fire that was creating all the smoke. Through many experiences, she was finally led to the Knowledge Book that provided all the answers. Marge is now talking about this gift to humanity on Knowledge Book Radio, so all can be united in peace, love, and harmony. This live call-in show at 1-800-930-2819 is amazing. So get ready to hear about the Knowledge Book. Here's your host, Marge Potasic.